If you had met us just 2 months after our wedding, you would have thought we were the perfect couple. Honestly, I thought so too. After 8 years together and finally tying the knot, I believed nothing could shake the bond we had built over time, our laughter, our trust. Every little thing about us seemed in perfect harmony, like a song that had been written just for us. Every note in sync with the rhythm of our hearts. Tom wasn't just handsome though, he certainly was. Those messy brown curls that refused to stay in place, that mischievous, lopsided smile that made people's hearts skip a beat, and those eyes that could somehow make you feel like the only person in the room. But what truly drew people to him wasn't just his looks. It was the way he made you feel seen, understood, and safe. Conversations with him flowed effortlessly, whether we were talking about abstract ideas like art and philosophy, or laughing about the smallest, most mundane moments of daily life. Around Tom, silence never felt awkward. Silence felt warm, like the comfortable pause in a familiar song, where no words were needed because everything was understood. But the truth is, what made me fall in love with him every single day wasn't just his charm or his wit. It was the little things that no one else would notice. The way he would wrap his arms around me after a long, exhausting day, holding me as if the world outside our apartment didn't exist. The way he truly listened when I was upset, never rushing me, never judging me, just being fully present. The small gestures, the kiss on my forehead when I was stressed, the hand resting gently on the small of my back as we walked together, these gestures spoke louder than words ever could. They made me feel safe, cherished, and loved. Our life together was full of routines that made our love feel alive every single day. On weekends, we would go dancing at this small, dimly lit bar in town that played Latin music. Tom wasn't a professional dancer, far from it, but he was playful and clumsy in the most endearing way, always making me laugh. He would spin me unexpectedly, sometimes purposely stepping off beat just so I could tease him. Those nights were pure joy, moments where the rest of the world melted away, leaving only us and the rhythm of the music. Weekday mornings were our time too. We jogged together down quiet tree-lined streets before the city had fully woken up. Those runs weren't just about exercise, they were where we shared our dreams, worries, and plans for the future. Sometimes we'd wander into art exhibits, and I'd watch Tom stand for minutes, tilting his head in front of an abstract painting as if he were solving a puzzle. "What do you think the artist meant with all these colors?" he'd ask. I'd roll my eyes, teasing, probably that they forgot to pay rent. He'd laugh, pull me close, and whisper, "That's why I need you to keep me grounded." Even in those moments, when the world felt absurd, ridiculous, or chaotic, he was my anchor. Even cooking dinner together became its own ritual. Music playing softly in the background, me chopping vegetables while he stirred the pot. Both of us singing off-key as if the kitchen were our private stage. Those ordinary nights filled with laughter, small arguments over who overcooked the pasta, and shared bites of whatever masterpiece we had created, felt magical. They felt sacred. They were ours. Tom's love for my family was equally evident. He'd joke with my dad about baseball, help my mum clear the table, and always show up when needed without hesitation. His own mother welcomed me wholeheartedly, calling me her daughter from the very start. The harmony between our families made everything feel even more solid, like nothing could touch us every morning. Waking up and seeing my wedding ring glinting in the sunlight, I would smile to myself and think, I made the right choice. This is forever. At night, lying beside him, Listening to his steady breathing, I felt a peace I had never known. Friends would ask, "So, what's it like being married now?" And I would laugh, feeling a glow in my chest. Nothing's changed, except happiness feels doubled. I was convinced that nothing, no one, could ever come between us. But I was wrong. There was a crack, small, almost invisible at first. And that crack had a name. Julia. At first, she barely registered her shadow in the background of our lives. I didn't think much of her. But little by little, she became the reason I started losing sleep at night. The reason my chest tightened with a tension I couldn't ignore. She became a quiet whisper in my mind, a source of doubt I didn't know how to quiet. Her presence, or even just the thought of her, made me question things I had never questioned before. Was Tom being honest? Was I imagining things? Was my heart exaggerating every small interaction? And yet, in those early days of our marriage, I was still blind to what was coming. I was wrapped up in my own fairy tale, blinded by the joy and security I felt in Tom's presence, not realizing how fragile happiness could be. I didn't see that a single smile, a single playful interaction from another woman, could plant a seed of insecurity, one that, left unchecked, would grow into a storm I could no longer control. For now, though, I clung to those perfect mornings, those stolen moments of laughter, the soft glow of our apartment in the evenings, the warmth of his hand in mine. I believed, with every fiber of my being, that what we had was unbreakable. I believed in the magic we created together, the laughter, the shared dreams, and the tiny rituals that made each day brighter. I thought love alone was enough to protect us from anything until the cracks began to show. And little did I know, those cracks wouldn't remain invisible for long. They would grow, slowly, like shadows creeping across a sunlit room, until I would have no choice but to face them, and in doing so, face truths about trust, love, and the fragile beauty of a human heart. If part one was the fairy tale, then Julia was the twist I never saw coming. Tom had mentioned her before, of course. My best friend from work, he'd say casually, like it was no big deal. Sometimes he'd talk about the long hours they pulled together on a project, or some inside joke they shared at the office. Back then, I didn't think much of it. Everybody has friends, right? And Tom was the type who got along with everyone. But the first time I met Julia, I felt something shift inside me. She wasn't rude, not in the obvious way. But the way she looked at MIT was like I wasn't supposed to be there, like I had walked into a room where I didn't belong. That blank, droll stare of hers carried more weight than any insult could. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe she was shy. Maybe she just wasn't good with new people. I tried, God knows I tried, to break the ice. I asked her questions, little things, trying to make conversation. She muttered one-word answers, scrolled through her phone like I wasn't worth her time. When Tom stepped out of the room, I thought, here's my chance to connect woman to woman. Instead, she looked up, sighed, and said, "I hate small talk," before going right back to her screen. That stung. Still, I bit my tongue. I told myself, don't make trouble. Don't be the jealous wife. I wanted to believe Tom when he brushed it all off as Julia just being edgy or quirky. He said she was harmless. He said she was just blunt. But then there were the little moments, the touches. One night we were all hanging out together, me, Tom, and Julia. Tom flexed his arm jokingly, showing off his bicep. Julia didn't just laugh. She reached out and stroked his arm, lingering longer than any friendly touch should. Then she smirked and said, "We should work out together sometime." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, the tone, the look in her eyes. And Tom laughed it off like it was nothing. I sat there smiling tightly, trying not to explode. But inside, something was burning. Because here's the thing. I know what flirting looks like. I know what attraction looks like. And whatever Tom wanted to believe, whatever excuse he wanted to feed me, what I saw was a woman crossing boundaries that should have never been touched. The worst part, Julia knew I was watching, and she didn't care. She wanted me to see. At first I wondered if I was crazy. Maybe I was just insecure. Maybe Julia really was harmless, and my imagination was turning shadows into monsters. Tom sure made me feel that way. Every time I brought it up, he waved me off. "It's just banter," he'd say. "She jokes like that with everyone." He'd chuckle, give me a kiss on the forehead, and say, "Don't overthink it." But that dismissal cut deeper than Julia's stares ever could. Because it wasn't just about Juliet, it was about Tom choosing not to see what I saw. About Tom choosing her side, even when I was sitting there, hurting. Telling him it made me uncomfortable. You know what's worse than feeling jealous? Feeling invisible. And that's exactly what I felt. Invisible. Then came the comment, sharp little daggers. Julia threw under the guise of jokes. She'd tease me about being too sensitive, make fun of something I said at dinner, roll her eyes when I tried to join in their conversations. Each time, Tom brushed it off. "She doesn't mean it like that." But words have weight, and hers crushed me. The breaking point came with a so-called prank. It was childish, humiliating, and honestly, it doesn't even matter what it wasn't funny. Not to me, not to anyone who respected me. It was designed to embarrass me in front of people I cared about. And it worked. I cried that night. I cried so hard my chest hurt. And when I looked at Tom, I didn't just see my husband, I saw someone who had failed to protect me. We ended up in marriage counseling because of it. That's how bad it got. I'll never forget sitting in that counselor's office, pouring out my heart, while Tom sat there insisting Julia meant no harm. I wanted to scream, but the counselor, she looked at Tom and said something that stuck with me. "Even if Julia had no bad intentions, your wife's feelings are real, and invalidating them is hurting your marriage." For once, Tom didn't have a comeback. He looked down, silent. I thought, finally, maybe he understands now. But even after all of that, even after Julia faded into the background of our lives, Tom still defended her in little ways. Still held on to this idea that she was innocent, that I was exaggerating, and every time he did, it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Because how do you make someone understand the way you feel, when the person hurting you isn't even the one you married, but the one your spouse refuses to see clearly? That was Julia's power. She didn't just come between us directly. She made Tom question me. She made him doubt my perspective. She made me doubt myself. And deep down, I started to wonder if the woman who turned him down years ago still had a piece of his heart, buried somewhere he refused to admit. I didn't want to believe it. God, I didn't. But when someone looks at your husband the way Julia looked at Tom, when they touch him like that, when they humiliate you just to prove a point, you can't help but wonder, what if? And once that thought takes root, it's impossible to unthink it. That's when my marriage, my perfect little bubble, started to crack. Not with a bang, not with a fight, But with the silent erosion of trust, piece by piece, every time Tom told me I was overthinking, and I began to realize, love alone doesn't keep you safe, trust does, and trust was slipping through my fingers. I used to think Julia's actions were limited to glances, gestures, and teasing words. But that night, she took it further, turning me into the joke in front of everyone. It was a small dinner gathering, just a few close friends. At first, everything seemed normal. Laughter, chatter, clinking glasses. I told myself, maybe Julia will behave tonight. Maybe it'll be fine. But deep down, I felt that pit in my stomach, the feeling that something was about to happen. And then it did. Julia arrived late, as usual, and walked in like she owned the room. She laughed, greeted everyone loudly, and sat right next to Tom as if it was her designated spot. I tried to stay calm, to remind myself not to overreact. At first, she said nothing alarming, but then came the so-called prank. I won't go into the specifics. It was childish, cruel, and every time I recall it, I still feel humiliated, but it was meant to embarrass me in front of the whole table. And it worked. Everyone laughed. Everyone, except me. I froze. My face burned, my hands shook. I felt small, invisible, humiliated in my own life, in front of my husband. And then I looked at Tom. He laughed. He didn't stop it. He didn't step in. I wanted to scream. That night, I cried like never before. Not because of Julia then I had seen who she was, but because of Tom. The man who vowed to protect me, to stand by me, chose to sit there and laugh along. When we got home, the argument erupted. Why didn't you stop her? Why didn't you protect me? I demanded. Tom stammered. I didn't think she meant any harm. Julia's just playful. You're overreacting. I almost shouted. Do you even hear yourself? I was humiliated right in front of you, and you chose to defend her. The fight went on for hours. I felt like I was talking to a wall. No matter how much pain I showed, Tom insisted Julia was innocent. The days that followed were tense. Meals were silent. Walks were quiet. Even in the same house, we felt miles apart. Finally, I said, we need marriage counseling. Tom hesitated. We can work it out ourselves. I don't want a stranger involved. I was firm. Either we go, or I don't know how much longer this marriage can survive. He had no choice but to agree. Our first counseling session was surreal. We sat across from a middle-aged woman whose job was to listen, to guide, to untangle our mess. I told her everything: the stares, the touches, the words, and especially the prank. I cried, my chest aching, as I recounted the feeling of being humiliated in front of my husband, Tom, sitting there, occasionally fidgeting, occasionally frowning. Defended Julia. She didn't mean anything. You're overreacting. I felt like I had been doused in ice water. Even here, in front of a professional, he was dismissing me. The counselor looked him straight in the eyes. Even if Julia didn't intend harm, your wife's feelings are real. And by dismissing them, you are actively harming your marriage. Silence. Tom lowered his gaze. Finally, I hoped for the first time that he understood, that he could see my pain. After that session, Tom promised to limit contact with Julia, and he did, slowly. He stopped inviting her to gatherings, stopped texting her as often. I thought maybe things would get better, but the wound in my heart didn't heal, because Julia wasn't the main problem. The real hurt came from Tom, from the man I loved more than anyone, who still refused to fully see my pain. Or worse, saw it but chose to ignore it. And that hurt was far worse than any prank Julia could pull. After that night, I could no longer view our marriage with naive optimism. I realized that love alone isn't enough. A lasting relationship needs understanding, empathy, and most importantly, loyalty. And at that moment, I wasn't sure Tom was truly on my side anymore. After Julia's prank and our first counseling session, I thought maybe things would get better. I really believed Tom finally understood the pain I'd been carrying and would take my feelings seriously. But life doesn't work that way. The days that followed were quieter than I had ever known our home to be. No more laughter bouncing off the walls. No more playful nights in the kitchen. No more early morning runs together. We were living under the same roof, yet felt like strangers. Every meal felt like walking on eggshells. I watched Tom talking to my parents, laughing at messages on his phone. And I couldn't help but wonder, was he still thinking about Julia? I realized then that cracks in a marriage rarely come from one dramatic event. They come from silence, from offhand words, from one partner constantly dismissing the other's feelings. Every time Tom gave me a faint smile when I mentioned Julia, or said, "She's harmless. You're overthinking it," it chipped away at my heart a little more. I started paying closer attention to Tom, not to control him, but to see if he was still the man I thought I knew. I needed signs that he was on my side, that he understood my pain, but it seemed hopeless. Tom didn't bring up Julia, but when I did, he immediately dismissed it. Sometimes with irritation, "You're overthinking again. That's all in the past." Those words cut deeper than any prank could. I felt abandoned, alone, even in my own marriage. One night, lying in bed, I sat up and looked around our empty room. I thought about 8 years together, all the memories, and asked myself, were those years enough for him to truly understand my pain? That's when it hit me. The crack wasn't really Julia. She was just a catalyst. The real fracture was trust, safety, and the belief that the person next to you will always stand by your side. We continued counseling, but each session felt like a test. Tom mostly sat quietly, nodding when the counselor spoke about my feelings. He didn't argue, but he didn't take initiative either. I felt drained, anxious. After every session, I'd wonder, is anyone really hearing me, or am I just talking to another wall? Meanwhile, I had to face myself. I had to admit that the hurt had made me more sensitive, more suspicious, more prone to emotional flare-ups. I didn't want to be the jealous wife, but my feelings were real. And when Tom kept dismissing them, they only grew stronger, until I felt I had to make him understand. That's why I did something I normally never would. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the embarrassment and hurt I had experienced, not to punish him, not to sabotage our marriage, but to show him how serious this was. One day at the gym, I approached a stranger, complimented his muscles, and jokingly suggested we work out together. I gave him a wink, playing it up, mirroring exactly what Julia had done with Tom. Tom exploded. "What are you doing? Why are you acting like that?" I stayed calm and looked him in the eye. "Do you feel it? Just a little harmless fun. Now you understand how I've felt all this time." He refused to admit it. "You're flirting. Julia never did that with me." I laughed bitterly. "That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you. Intent doesn't matter. My feelings are real. Have you ever even tried to feel what I felt? The argument went on for hours. I was angry, frustrated, but also relieved finally he had a glimpse of the pain I endured. But one night like that couldn't undo months of neglect. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly, through action and understanding. The days after were still tense. Counseling continued. Tom slowly became a little more open, starting to listen rather than dismiss. But I could still feel the distance. Not because I wanted to hold a grudge, but because healing takes time. Trust has to be earned again. I realized then that marriage isn't always smooth, isn't always perfect like those early days. It's a process, a continuous effort from both people. Julia was only the spark. The real crack was in how we dealt with pain, understanding, and respecting each other's emotions. I told myself, if we want long-term happiness, we have to face this pain, and Tom has to walk this path with me. After weeks of tension, silence, and unspoken frustration, I realized that the cracks in our marriage could only start to heal if Tom truly acknowledged what had happened, and if my feelings were finally seen. I remember one evening, coming home from another counseling session. We sat on our familiar sofa in the living room, not speaking, just listening to the ticking clock and the faint sound of the wind outside. I could see the exhaustion on Tom's face, not from work or life, but from everything between us. I took a deep breath and thought, this is the moment. No more holding back. Can you just listen to me tonight, without interrupting? I asked, my voice shaky but steady. Tom looked at me seriously and nodded. I'll listen. No interruptions. I poured out everything: the prank, Julia's touches, her glances, her words, and most importantly, the humiliation, the feeling of abandonment, the erosion of trust. I told him not just the events, but how I had felt inside, every single raw emotion. Tom was silent. He didn't argue, didn't dismiss me. He just looked at me, his eyes full of confusion and regret. When I finished, I held my breath, and then, slowly, he said, You're right. I should never have let you feel hurt like that. I was wrong. I couldn't believe it. Just one sentence, and it felt like a weight I had carried for months was lifted, even if only slightly. He continued, voice soft, almost trembling. I thought Julia was just joking, just having fun. I never considered that you could feel humiliated, that you could be hurt. I was blind. I'm sorry. Hearing him, I felt a strange mix of pain and relief. Pain for the months I had endured, but relief that he was finally admitting the truth. We sat there in silence for a few minutes. I looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, something I had been craving for so long. For the first time in months, I felt that he truly wanted to be on my side. I took his hand. Just admitting that makes me feel so much safer. Tom squeezed my hand. I know, I won't let this happen again. I want us to get through this. Really get through it, together. That night marked a new chapter in our marriage. Nothing became perfect overnight. We still had disagreements, still had doubts. But this time, we had a starting point, acknowledgement, honesty, and a determination to repair what had been broken. Over the following nights, we talked long into the evenings. Tom began to open up about his own feelings during the days Julia was still in our lives. He admitted that sometimes he didn't know what to do, was afraid that any wrong move would hurt me more. But staying silent and failing to protect me had been a bigger mistake. I listened. And for the first time, we weren't just talking about events. we were talking about emotions, about pain, about how each of us experienced this marriage. I realized that facing our feelings together and taking responsibility was the first step toward healing the deepest cracks. In the days that followed, Tom became more proactive. He asked about my feelings, my fears, the insecurities I was still carrying. He started showing care the way I needed, not the way he assumed I needed. He put my emotions first, instead of worrying about Julia or his own comfort. I also learned to express my pain without fearing I would be labeled too sensitive or dramatic. I realized that when both partners are sincere and willing to take responsibility, even the biggest conflicts can start to be untangled. The hardest part wasn't admitting mistakes, it was learning to trust again. I knew I could never erase the months of hurt, but I could choose to give Tom a chance, to believe that he would not repeat the same mistakes. That night, sitting on the sofa together, soft light from the lamp casting a warm glow, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a quiet sense of warmth. Not a perfect fairy tale, but something real. We were facing this together, repairing what was broken, and moving forward side by side. For the first time since Julia entered our lives, I felt that no matter what the past held, Tom and I could rebuild trust and happiness together. After that heart-to-heart conversation, a gentle sense of hope started creeping back into my heart. It wasn't magic. It didn't fix everything instantly. But for the first time in months, I could see that Tom genuinely wanted to change. And sometimes, it's the small steps that matter the most in a marriage. In those early days, I paid attention to the little things. Tom no longer stayed silent when I mentioned Julia. Instead, he would ask, "How are you feeling today? Is there anything bothering you?" A simple question, yet it carried immense weight. For the first time, I felt truly seen, truly heard. He began changing his daily interactions with me. Our evenings on the sofa were no longer silent or distracted by phones. Instead, we talked, shared the trivial details of our days, our worries, and our little joys. I realized that happiness doesn't need grand gestures. It can be as simple as feeling understood and shared. Tom also started showing affection in the ways I needed. He didn't just say, "I love you" or "I'm sorry" out of habit. He genuinely cared about my feelings. He held me, asked if I wanted to talk, if I needed a break. And most importantly, he prioritized my emotional safety above everything else. One evening, while walking in the park near our home, Tom held my hand tighter than usual. He looked into my eyes, sincere and steady. "I know I hurt you, and I don't want that to ever happen again. I want you to feel safe with me. Truly safe." I felt that sincerity, and slowly, my lingering fear began to ease. I realized that healing wouldn't be fast, but every small step was worth it. Counseling continued. But this time, the focus wasn't just on Julia. It was about effective communication, expressing needs and emotions clearly. And most importantly, we're building trust. In these sessions, Tom showed a remarkable change. He no longer made excuses or defended Julia. He spoke openly about his own feelings of helplessness, about not knowing what to do when I was in pain, and about how staying silent had only made things worse. I listened, and for the first time in months, I felt we were truly reconnecting. I also learned to manage my own emotions. I learned to recognize when I was overreacting, when anxiety or hurt hadn't been processed, and most importantly, to express it calmly and clearly. I realized that marriage isn't just about love, it's about emotional maturity on both sides. Another important turning point was Tom taking concrete actions to demonstrate trust and respect. He limited contact with Julia, avoided gatherings that made me uneasy, and whenever communication with her was necessary, he was transparent. He knew that consistent actions and honesty were the only ways to rebuild the trust I had lost. We also created new happiness routines. Phone-free evenings dedicated to each other. Weekend runs, not just for exercise, but to talk and cooking together, where laughter and joy became glue for our relationship. These seemingly small things were, in fact, vital in mending what had been broken. I remember one particular moment. We were baking one rainy evening, the soft patter of rain on the windows, warm lamplight in the kitchen. Tom laughing as I struggled with the dough. He gently held my hand and said, "I'm happy when I see you smile. I know I hurt you, but I want to make it up to you in every way I can." I looked at him and felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Not perfection, but warmth. For the first time since all this started, I knew we were moving in the right direction from cracks and pain. But together, I understood that marriage is a journey, not a destination. The wounds will always be there as part of our history, but what matters is how we learn from them, how we care for each other, and how we stand by one another. The first steps of healing are about accepting the past, facing emotions, and taking tangible actions to repair. And I knew, with Tom's sincerity and our combined effort, we could continue walking this path step by step, no matter how far the road ahead. The first steps toward healing brought hope, but they also opened the door to new challenges I hadn't anticipated. Trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight, and often the hardest tests weren't about Julia at all. They were about the lingering doubts and deep-seated pain we had both carried. In the weeks that followed, I realized patience was the most crucial factor. Every time Tom asked how I was feeling, I had to answer honestly without overreacting. Every time something he did triggered my anxiety, I had to take a deep breath and respond thoughtfully. Controlling my emotions wasn't easy, but I knew it was necessary if our marriage was to survive. Tom faced his own struggles too. Every time I brought up Julia, or a memory from the past surfaced, he had to resist the urge to defend himself and truly listen. That wasn't simple. He had been accustomed to denial, justification, or ignoring my feelings. Now, he had to practice accountability and put my emotions first. One afternoon, while walking through the park, a sudden wave of unease hit me. One of Tom's old friends, a woman, passed by and smiled at him. My heart raced, and I realized that jealousy and fear still lingered even. Though I knew Tom had changed, I stayed silent. Tom noticed my expression, took my hand, stopped, and looked straight into my eyes. "I know you're worried. I don't want you to feel insecure. It's just you and me." Those simple words brought relief, but I also understood that patience wasn't just Tom's responsibility, was mine too. I had to trust his actions instead of letting past emotions control me. In the days that followed, challenges kept appearing in different forms. Once, Tom received a message from Julia about a work project. A rush of anger, anxiety, and suspicion hit me, but this time, instead of reacting explosively, I took a deep breath and chose to have an honest, open conversation. "Why is Julia messaging you?" I asked, my voice shaky but steady. Tom looked at me and spoke calmly. "It's work. You know I always try to be transparent with you. If you want, I can share everything, the content, the timing, everything." I felt my heart calm. Instead of seeing it as a threat, I saw it as a test of trust and transparency. We sat down, went through every detail, and discussed it openly. By the end, I felt a quiet sense of peace knowing we were facing challenges together. Rather than letting them drive a wedge between us, the challenges weren't just external, they came from within each of us. I still felt doubts at times, lingering pain, but thanks to our heart-to-heart conversations and Tom's consistent actions, I learned to restrain suspicion and communicate honestly and calmly. We also created safe moments, everyday times just for us to talk, to share emotions without distractions. Phone-free evenings, simple yet meaningful dinners, walks at sunset holding hands. These became small but powerful remedies to mend our cracks. I realized that marriage is never a straight path. It's full of challenges, requiring patience, forgiveness, and emotional self-control. But it's these small daily steps, the patient effort, and genuine actions that help a relationship weather the storms. One evening, sitting on the sofa after a long day, Tom softly said, "I know we still have challenges ahead, but I promise I won't give up. I'll do everything I can to make you feel safe and happy." I looked at him, sensing his sincerity, and for the first time in months, I believed we could overcome anything. Not because everything was perfect, but because we had learned patience, how to face pain, and how to move forward together in the days that followed. I understood that true happiness in marriage isn't about avoiding conflict, it's about facing it together. Patience and daily effort are the bridges that turn cracks into connection, slowly rebuilding trust, piece by piece. And I knew that with Tom by my side, with our shared sincerity and determination, we could keep moving forward, overcoming each challenge, day by day, no matter how long or difficult the road ahead. After weeks of patience and overcoming challenges, I began to realize that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day. It's the effort to understand and cherish each other. The cracks in our marriage didn't disappear overnight, but they created opportunities for Tom and me to rediscover the colors we once thought were lost. One Sunday morning, as soft sunlight streamed through the living room window, Tom suggested we make breakfast together. We wore comfortable clothes, chopped vegetables, and whisked eggs side by side, laughter filling the small kitchen. I looked at him, and for the first time in months, I saw tenderness in his eyes. No tension, no defensiveness, just genuine warmth. "I love moments like this," he said, eyes never leaving mine. "Just us, together, nothing else." I smiled, feeling my heart warm. These simple moments were proof of the change, not grand promises, but consistent daily actions of listening, caring, and sharing that had slowly started to heal the wounds in my heart. We began incorporating more love activities, not in flashy or overly romantic ways, but by discovering what made both of us happy and connected. Evening walks in the park, trying new recipes together, or simply sitting on the balcony, sipping coffee and chatting about the little things in life. One afternoon, while running together, Tom took my hand and whispered, "I know we've been through a lot, but I want you to know I love you, and I won't let the past repeat itself." I felt the sincerity in his words and gestures. No defensiveness, no lingering sense of being abandoned, just closeness, genuine sharing. I realized that love doesn't always need grand declarations. It's the small, consistent actions that sustain a relationship. We also created our own mini anniversaries, moments dedicated solely to each other, free from work, phones, or the outside world. Sometimes it was a cozy movie night. Other times, a short city outing, just the two of us. These moments helped rebuild our emotional connection, piece by piece. I also understood that for love to grow, both partners must face their own emotions. I learned not to carry past pain or doubts into the present moment. I gave Tom and myself the chance to love again, to experience closeness without being haunted by history. Tom learned from this experience too. He realized love isn't just words, it's care, respect, and the willingness to confront difficulties rather than avoid them. He understood that consistent daily actions, transparency, and attention were the best ways to prove his love. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, Tom suddenly pulled me close, placed his hand on my shoulder, and said, "You know, I've learned so much from everything we went through. I realized that loving each other means taking responsibility, growing together, and, most importantly, always trusting each other." I looked into his eyes and felt every word, every gaze. For the first time in months, I felt we weren't just recovering our marriage, we were rediscovering love through small acts, genuine presence, and shared moments in the days that followed. We built our own love traditions, things just for us, home-cooked dinners, quiet evenings reading together, short messages throughout the day checking in on each other. Each small action was like a brick, mending the cracks in our hearts and creating a stronger, deeper bond. I realized that marriage and love isn't about perfect moments. It's about persistence, the daily choices to love, listen, and stay by each other's side even when things aren't easy. And when both partners put in the effort, love doesn't just return, it grows stronger, deeper, and more meaningful than ever. Finally, I understood something crucial. Real love isn't about avoiding challenges, it's about discovering, overcoming, and growing through them together. With Tom by my side, with both of our sincerity and determination, I knew we had found our love again. This time, it was enduring, grounded, and filled with hope. After beginning to rediscover love, Tom and I felt our relationship slowly stabilizing. But marriage is never a smooth road. The greatest challenges sometimes appear in the most ordinary moments. And we were about to face the final test, true test of the trust we had just started to rebuild. One day, Tom received an invitation to attend a work gathering from Julia. At first, my heart sank. The feelings of anxiety and suspicion surged like a tidal wave. I had endured too much pain to easily brush it aside. I took a deep breath, trying to control my emotions. I remembered everything we had done to rebuild trust, all the times Tom had been transparent, attentive, and prioritized my feelings. I knew that how I responded this time would determine a lot about our future together. "Why are you accepting this invitation?" I asked, my voice trembling but controlled. Tom looked at me, eyes serious. "You know, this is part of work. I'll go, but I want you to feel reassured. I'll be transparent with you about everything. If you want, I can tell you the schedule and how I'll communicate with Julia." I felt my heart soften. This was my chance to test my own trust, whether I could rely on the actions, transparency, and love Tom had consistently shown over the past weeks. The gathering took place, and just as Tom had promised, he kept a polite distance from Julia, with no gestures or words that could make me uneasy. He also proactively texted me, sharing details about the event, what happened, and how he felt. The small but meaningful actions made me realize that trust is not innate, is built through consistency, practical actions, and mutual respect, in the following days. We continued to reinforce trust through small but crucial actions, long conversations every evening, sharing feelings without judgment, and continuous attention to seemingly minor details that provided a sense of security. I realized that trust is built step by step, and to maintain it, both partners must persevere and never give up when faced with challenges. One evening, sitting together on the sofa, Tom held my hand and said, "I know the past hurt you. I can't change that, but I can ensure that from now on, I will be transparent, honest, and always put your feelings first. I want you to feel safe, truly safe." I felt the sincerity in every word, every glance. This time, I no longer felt doubt or excessive worry. Instead, I felt a strong connection, knowing that we had faced this final test together. We realized that rebuilding trust is not the responsibility of one person alone. It is a shared responsibility. I learned to give Tom opportunities, to trust his actions rather than letting the past haunt me. Tom learned to actively maintain transparency, so that every gesture and word proved his love and respect for me. In the weeks that followed, our relationship became stronger. We were no longer haunted by past events, focusing instead on the present, on how we loved, cared for, and supported each other. Trust isn't something naturally given, but when built and maintained, it becomes a solid foundation for any relationship. One day, while cooking dinner together, Tom smiled at me and said, "I know we've been through a lot, but thanks to everything we've faced, I feel we are stronger, closer, and love each other even more." I smiled, deeply sensing that challenges are not just difficulties, they are opportunities for growth, for reinforcing trust, and for making love stronger. The final test had passed, and we continued forward, steady, with hearts full of trust and hope. Ultimately, I understood that marriage isn't just about loving each other when things are easy, it's about facing challenges together, rebuilding trust, and maintaining connection in every circumstance. And with Tom by my side, I knew we had found safety, sincerity, and true love, a love that will endure, unshaken by any hardships. After all the challenges, the pain, and the steps toward healing, Tom and I finally reached a stage of peace and happiness in our marriage. We were no longer the people of the past, weighed down by doubt, hurt, and insecurity. Instead, we became a couple who truly appreciated, listened to, and loved each other through consistent daily actions. Every smile, every glance, and even the small acts of kindness, the way he made coffee just the way I liked it, or the way I left him a note before work, became threads that wove us together stronger than before. We began to realize that marriage is not just about walking together during happy moments, but also about patience, empathy, and the ability to face life's obstacles together, both big and small. It's about showing up for each other when life is mundane or messy, the laundry piles, the bills, the stress of work, the disagreements about what to eat for dinner. Ordinary moments, breakfast together, an evening walk, holding hands on a quiet street became proof of real love. Reminders that the foundation of a relationship is built in the everyday, not just the extraordinary. Tom and I created our own habits of happiness. Phone-free evenings, meals just for the two of us, short messages during the day to check in on each other's feelings. We learned to give trust and receive trust, step by step, without rushing and without missing any opportunity to strengthen our love. Sometimes it was as simple as him asking, "How was your day?" and really listening, or me noticing when he seemed tired and suggesting a quiet evening together. These moments, repeated daily, quietly cemented our connection and reminded us that love is sustained by attention and care. One afternoon, sitting on the balcony watching the sunset, Tom looked at me and said, "I know love isn't always easy, but because of everything we've been through, I feel we are stronger, closer, and love each other more than ever." I felt the sincerity in his voice and eyes. At that moment, I understood that happiness in marriage doesn't come from perfection, but from learning to love, taking responsibility together, and growing together. It's about showing up even when you're tired or frustrated, about choosing compassion over defensiveness, about holding space for each other's vulnerabilities. We also realized that the education in marriage is a combination of discipline and love, accountability and guidance, not for children anymore, but for us as adults. We learned to control negative emotions, to dialogue instead of argue, and to respect each other in every action and every word. When disagreements arose, we no longer aimed to win or prove a point. Instead, we asked, how can we understand each other better? Only when both partners put in the effort can a marriage be strong, and love truly complete. One evening, after preparing dinner together, Tom pulled me close, placed his hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "I know we've been through a lot of heartbreak, but I want you to know that from now on, I will always strive to make you feel safe, happy, and truly loved. I want us to grow together, to maintain trust and love together." I smiled, feeling complete peace in my heart. For the first time in months, I realized that all the efforts, all the challenges, and all the moments of doubt had led us to a stronger, deeper, and enduring love. We had built a foundation that could weather the small storms of everyday life and the occasional tempests that might come our way. We understood that marriage isn't about avoiding conflict, it's about facing challenges together, learning from mistakes, and always prioritizing love, trust, and connection. Even a disagreement about chores or finances became an opportunity to practice communication and empathy. Only then can love be truly complete and a relationship remain strong. Looking back on our journey, I realized that happiness in marriage is not accidental. It is the result of patience, empathy, and consistent actions to love and protect each other. Love is not just a feeling, it is a choice, a responsibility, and a lifelong commitment. It's in remembering anniversaries, but also in remembering the small ways your partner likes their coffee, the exact tone of voice they use when stressed, or the way they prefer to spend a Sunday morning with Tom by my side. With trust rebuilt, and with daily acts of sincerity, I knew we had found true love, a love that is enduring, fulfilling, and filled with hope. We no longer feared challenges, because we knew that together we could overcome anything. Even when life threw unexpected obstacles, career changes, family stress, minor health scares, we faced them together as a team, supporting and comforting each other. And the final message I want to share with anyone in love or marriage is this: education in love through patience, compassion, empathy, and tangible actions is the key to building a happy, strong, and fulfilling marriage. Love is truly complete only when both partners grow together, respect each other, and take responsibility together. We had weathered the storms, learned to love again from the start, and now we move forward on the path of happiness with whole hearts, with trust, and with love that nothing can shake. Every shared laugh, every quiet night spent together, Every small kindness became a brick in the sturdy foundation of our life together. We learned that love isn't about avoiding hardship, it's about embracing it, learning from it, and letting it shape you both into stronger, more compassionate partners. And as I look at Tom now, I see not just a husband, but a true companion, a teammate, and a partner in every sense. We know that life is unpredictable, but our love has become a constant source of comfort, strength, and joy. We have built something rare, a love that endures, deepens, and flourishes with each passing day.